All set.
Sounds good. Let's get started. Today's February 23rd. This is our Diversity, Equity, Anti-Racism Subcommittee meeting. And we would like to start off with the approval of minutes of February 4th, 2021. Since you guys just received it a few minutes ago, I'm just going to give you like 5 minutes to just read through it, and then we'll take a vote.
Hi, Malia.
If everyone is done, let me know. We can start either comments or take a motion.
I move to accept the minutes as written.
Second.
Sounds great. So let's go down voting. Member Longbalio,
Aye.
Member Woodland,
Yep.
Member Gustafson,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So let's get on to our next item on our agenda. It's pretty concise, but I think like it'll give us a great opportunity to go through it with some concentration. So the policy, continued reviewing the policy 6437, promoting civil rights and prohibiting harassment, discrimination, and hate crimes. And Brendan, if you don't mind, would you be sharing your screen so that we can all follow along with this policy and read and make comments?
Absolutely. I'll do that right now. All right. Does that need to be zoomed probably? Is that okay?
That looks good. Yeah.
Is that
Yep.
okay? Great. Center that. All right, so that's up now, Asma. Are you kicking us off, Asma?
If you don't mind, you can read it, and I think we should just take it paragraph by paragraph.
Okay, and as we go, I can make, to help with
Edit.
Linda, I can make some comments too as people go
Yes.
on the document. So, okay. So do we want to take turns reading it? I can start off.
Sure, that'd be great.
Is that good? Okay. Okay, policy relating to pupil services, promoting civil rights and prohibiting harassment, discrimination, and hate crimes. The Wachusett Regional School District is committed to providing our students equal educational opportunities and a safe learning environment free from harassment, discrimination, and hate crimes. The district will not tolerate unlawful or disruptive behaviors at school or school-related activities, including curricula, instructional programs, staff development, extracurricular activities, and parent involvement. The district will promptly investigate all reports and complaints of harassment, discrimination, and hate crimes, and will take prompt, effective action to end such behaviors, including, when appropriate, referral to law enforcement agencies.
To me, that seems pretty straightforward, but go ahead. Sorry, Asma.
No, I was just going to encourage people, please go ahead and comment.
Well, I have a question, a process question, and I'm sorry to be a pain. I guess I wanted to maybe clarify what our purpose is, because I know at our last meeting, and actually the last two meetings, we started looking at this, and then we kind of broke it up into different pieces and talked about how the different pieces are handled and maybe shouldn't all be in the single policy. And we had some discussion about different pieces of it, but we didn't actually clarify. I mean, that's kind of where we left it. We didn't actually clarify if we think we need to replace it as is, or if it needs to have a more narrow focus. And then we break some of those other pieces out as we talked about, like, for example, the gender identity and discrimination on sex, which MASC breaks out, because those were my sections. But I think before I go through the whole thing, it's helpful to know kind of the lens and the goal, because I don't know if we really settled on that. We talked through a lot of things, but we didn't, and then we ran out of time, honestly. So we didn't really come to any conclusion about, we started with where we were, but we didn't come to any conclusion as to what direction we want to go with this.
Mhm.
And I think for me personally, that's helpful when looking at it to kind of know what our end goal is. If that makes sense.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I think like that's a discussion we can have right now as members about what exact lens we want to look at this with. But Brendan, I know with the two presentations we had last time, with some of the research the other members did, do you have any idea of the other policies that were related or could be related that we should also address at the same time? Because we were talking about, you know, some of these other policies and maybe looking at how other people have split it up, or not repeating the same information that MASC already has. So could you give us a little bit of an insight on that?
Yeah, well, I think, so I'm going back to Malaya maybe before answering that, because I think that's a really important thing for us to establish, like how we're going to divvy this up, if we're going to keep it as is or divide it up. And I don't think, like you said, we reached a decision about that, but it seems like we were leaning towards breaking up the policies to be more digestible and manageable, and to have it be centered around the model of the MASC policy. So I think we were going in that direction, and correct me if I'm wrong. And I'd be inclined to go in that direction as well. I think it'd be a real improvement to what we have now, which is very layered and clumped, if you will. So, so maybe that's something to discuss first. Oh, Malay, you're muted. I know you're saying something.
I was going to say, I'm sure everyone else has opinions as well. So
Yeah.
I certainly do. I just wanted to figure that out before we start looking at it in detail.
Yeah, well, so what I recall us discussing last time was to focus on pulling out procedures from the harassment policy, and seeing what can be included in the procedures that are within the anti-bullying plan. And then we had also talked about Laura's research about the non-discrimination policy and how we might want to look at that as the next part of what to pull out of the harassment policy in order to refocus it so it's practical. So I don't know if maybe I mean that's where I recall leaving off the discussion from this group. And that might give us a direction for what the next step is. Maybe something that's kind of more black and white of procedure. That might be a good kind of get the ball rolling.
Mhm.
I don't know. That's my take.
Yeah, I think taking out the procedures does make a certain amount of sense. And it does clarify it and pare it down somewhat. Is that what you were, I'm gonna make sure, was that what, the direction you were going, Linda, with that comment?
Yeah, that's what I think that's where I assumed our discussion would go today.
Mm-hmm.
Was
But, I
identifying
mean,
the
that's an
pieces that
assumption.
are redundant.
Well, right, the procedures that are no longer relevant, that we can use the anti-bullying plan as the outline. And if we're gonna,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something that needs to be stated, but then I would see that as like the next layer of review of the policy of once the procedures are taken out, how to record, look at the anti-bullying policy for investigation procedures, etc. But I was seeing that as two steps, and then another step of where the non-discrimination policy comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are the other ones that MASC has pulled out separate as well, like Malia was talking about with gender identity and things.
The one about, well, they don't have a gender identity policy, although
Oh,
I did
right.
research on that and found out some schools districts do, but that's a whole other discussion if we want one or not. But they do have one specifically on discrimination on the basis of sex, which is included in this. So if we wanted to separate that out, then that's a separate policy. Well, it is according to MASC if we're following their guidelines. So
Right. I was
Sorry,
under the same impression that's what we would want to do too, similar to what Linda was stating.
okay.
No, I just an idea because the idea of taking out procedures and kind of looking through and making sure it's not in there. I wonder if we would also accomplish that by starting with a template like an MASC policy, and then basically later we could cross-check with our old policy and see what might be missing. So I'm wondering about starting with like a fresh new one and then looking at what we might have lost from the old policy and then bringing it in if it makes sense. Just a way to, because I think we have to do this pretty sequentially and kind of small chunks because there's a lot here.
Yep.
And that might be one way to do it.
Well, so what I had looked at with the harassment side by side was that the MASC sample is not quite so easy to use.
Yeah,
I think
right.
some of their policies are great, but I think that one is, I think somewhere along the lines, the plot might have been lost. So I think that their beginning is pretty good for, is a pretty good replacement for what we have as our beginning. But then once they begin with the sexual harassment section, that's where I think we might need to invent our own.
Gotcha. Yeah. So at the very least, does it make sense to start with the harassment piece and like maybe just focus on that, and whether we look at MASC like we did last time or our existing policy? Just thinking where we start is so many different ways we could go here, and once we get into it.
Let's do it side by side, like you suggested.
So side by side, meaning MASC and our
Yes.
old one. Okay. So that could be a little tricky to do here.
Otherwise, it might get hard to follow along what MASC was stating and what ours was stating.
Linda, that was what you did last time, right? That was your present. Oh, you're not there.
Yeah, no, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry.
So the let me see. Actually, I can.
Because maybe revisiting that would help get us back into
Yeah.
that mindset.
Do you want me to share
Oh
my
yeah,
screen instead?
let me stop sharing. I'll share the sharing. There we go.
Okay. Is it up, guys?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So these are the beginning ones, but I will say that the side-by-side I did loses its faithfulness of the order pretty quickly because they are starting from such different, different starting points. So
Different places. All right.
yeah, I think there's just like a different point of view, a different goal, maybe. I don't know.
So I guess that goes back to my question. Is our goal, like we have harassment up on the screen. So is our goal to start with the harassment policy similar to the ACAB as our guide, which is kind of broad? And then as we go, I'm sure we'll see the other pieces like the separate, there's a lot of them. There's like 2 or 3 we identified last time that are missing probably that are in our current policy, but we can make notes of those and work on them as we go. But is our starting point to figure out something similar to the ACAB harassment policy?
I would say so, but I think like we've decided as a group that we do want some smaller policies that are better digestible. So that we've
Right.
actually accomplished. Now the question is, how do we want to get that to the smaller policies?
Okay.
And the easiest way might be to look at the way MASC divided it up.
Mm-hmm.
And then like Brendan was, advising, look
Yep.
at that as a starting point and then bringing the stuff that we have in our policy into it so that we don't
Right.
lose things that we had already had as benefits in our district.
That makes sense. Okay.
So if I recall correctly, this was what I had seen as that beginning section of what how ours breaks up the who, where, and responsibility, and then versus ACAB. And so what I saw was a different starting point of, harassment is not tolerated in ACAB versus ours began with providing our students equal education opportunities and a safe learning environment. So,
Different goals.
yeah. So I think that the equal education opportunities and safe learning environment free from harassment, discrimination, and hate crimes. I would want to see if that is actually better stated, accomplished, worked through in the non-discrimination policy that we have. I don't know if that's just kind of where, a place we could start. I don't know what other thoughts are, if that makes sense to go there. But I think otherwise the location, the who's responsible, let's see, in this section, I won't get fancy.
I don't even know how to do that.
Yeah, really.
I learned so much from my daughter's teacher while I'm helping her out. So I think that the kind of responsibility or the promise, as I kind of looked at them in the research coming up to last time, I think that ACAB is better defined. I think that the location idea is better defined. So the main issue in my eyes is that how we're starting out with, harassment not tolerated versus, providing equal educational opportunities.
Belinda, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at it as one is more of like it's not tolerated, more of on a negative perspective, right? It's not tolerated, expect to be some
Mhm.
sort of punishment, some sort of reprimanding, versus the way we've stated it is more of we promise that this is the environment and our goal that we want to provide so that the other thing doesn't happen inherently. So I'm not seeing it necessarily as two different things or maybe even two major different perspectives. I'm just seeing it as one stating more positively, one stating a little bit more harshly. I don't know if other people have differences of opinion on that one.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that sums it up.
Do we have a place to go from there? I mean, so
Well, I like the way we say it better.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's more of a commitment versus, like I said, I think I'm not going to explain this well, but I think it's, I prefer being proactive in setting expectations that this is the environment we're going to have, whether it's in a classroom or out of a classroom or whatever the situation in our district or in our employment policies or whatever, that this is the expectation versus we won't tolerate, which sounds more like a punishment after the fact and a response to something rather than being proactive in what we are standing for and value.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
That makes sense to me, Malaya, because I think that not tolerating goes back to zero tolerance, which
Yep.
we should never go back to.
Right.
It just never worked. So
right.
I think that makes a lot of sense to me.
So can I add that I agree with that take on the two starting points completely. Where I pause is the list of harassment, discrimination, and hate crimes. Only because discrimination and hate crimes are never defined within the existing policy. And so there's not like a legal callback at the end. There's nothing. So I would be hesitant to keep those as is, without thinking about it. But I do think that, I mean, I see that too, right? Like it's that zero tolerance days, in the alternative. So. So since we do have a non-discrimination policy, I mean, this is where I would really love to hear the committee members who have been on here longer, on the full committee longer than about, how that would play in, the policies working together.
Well, I mean, the two policies, I mean, it's more a matter of tone than substance, I think. Um, one refers under the who, one refers merely to harassment. The other one talks about harassment, discrimination, and hate crimes. So the one on the right is more narrow because it just talks about harassment, and discrimination is broader than harassment, and hate crimes are uh, something else, or even take it up another notch, or two or more. So I like the breadth of the current Wachusett policy. It covers more kinds of behavior, and as Leah was saying, it sort of asserts what kind of environment we're trying to create.
With the mention of with the talk of hate crimes too, that just reminded me of hate crimes versus hate incidents and the burden of proof, I suppose, is a little different, and in a way, I would think makes a bit of a stronger statement if it's changed to incidences. That was one idea I had come across before last meeting. I don't know if that plays into it at all. And then,
So
yeah,
you're
and then,
suggesting, just to be clear, Linda, if I don't misunderstand you, you're saying maybe change the word hate crimes to hate incidents?
yeah, so it would
Okay.
cover not just something that is an actual crime, but something that is related, maybe not.
I
rise
really
to the level.
like that. I really like that suggestion. Because proving something is a hate crime actually is like a legal term, right? And it's also, I think, has to be proven that the crime was committed and then it was created with a motive that was under what would be considered discriminatory. So I think it goes a little bit too deep and maybe too involved for, a school policy, which I think hate incidents gives, I'm hoping legally gives us a little bit more freedom to cover that aspect.
I've never heard that term before. Is that now commonly used?
I don't know how commonly used it is. I know I've seen it in Attorney Healy's statement that she had put out for schools on harassment policies. That just came out in November. So I don't know, because that was what I kept on looking through is, okay, well, where's the definition? Where's the callback? Where's the reference?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not seeing it. So looking at it in her guidance, actually, I think there was the discussion of incidents versus crime.
That's interesting.
And her guidance for schools was using incidences.
That's very interesting, huh? I mean, I'm certainly I'm inclined to go with that as well. I just wouldn't want to create the perception that we're somehow backing away from being against hate crimes. I don't think we are, because hate crimes would be a type of hate incident, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So I mean,
Works for me.
And I think getting at the incidents is more proactive rather than like it's not like the threshold is lower for when we would intervene, So that's a preventative piece.
And I also like staying away from anything that suggests getting into the criminal justice system whenever we possibly can. That's my view.
Absolutely.
The term that we're changing it to is hate incidences and not incidences of hate. I don't know, just like in my brain, I can't put. Is that wrong English?
I think if Maura Healy used it, darn it, it has to be good English.
I don't know. I mean, put it whatever way it says it.
It's a good question. Why do we call it hate crimes and not crime of hate, like they say crime of passion?
Right?
Now,
Hi. I just have sorry.
No,
sorry
okay.
I was late, guys. I'm glad I got to come on. My husband got out of class early, but I'm just questioning being devil's advocate. I like Linda's idea of make it hate incidents or incidents of hate, whichever. But when I see the word hate crimes, it makes me think like it's not tolerated when I see that anywhere written. I always thought of it as it's something that's not tolerated, so it's looked at as a hate crime. That's how I read it when I see those words. When I hear incident, I just think like it's minor. It's looked at as being minor. minor not in the sense of, oh, it's just a minor hate crime, but just, I don't know, it doesn't seem as strong to me saying incident versus crime. I get getting away from the legal part, but
Well, I think
I
what
don't
it,
it's my idea. I don't know.
well, and I'm thinking, you know, when I was a principal before, so what I like about the incident language, incidents, is you can intervene earlier and it doesn't have to rise to the level of a crime, because we really, once that happens, and we're way too late in the game. So,
yeah.
you know, it allows for the flexibility to intervene earlier, and not in worst case scenario, schools could hide behind like, well, it wasn't a crime. So, and that's not ever what we want to do. We want to be, you know, preventative, proactive, deal with things when they're small, so they're not huge, big problems. So that's what I like about it, you know. And I think it's actually taking it more seriously in some ways because it's starting earlier. So, just another idea. I was wondering if it would be, if we're looking at making a separate harassment policy, which it sounds like we are, if we want to build that. I mean, it sounds like we're looking at like what would be useful for kind of the preamble part before even getting into the policy. And if we want to do that, I could share a document and with you all and on the screen, and we could kind of build it together and just, you know, at least start at the beginning. If that's where we're going, it seems like that would make sense.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to drop a
Right, and I'll
link.
pull this down.
If that's good with everyone, I'll just drop a link into the chat that will bring you to the document, and I can share on the screen too if that makes sense. Just hang on one second, and I'll make everybody commenters. The document, and then I'll share. Okay. Because I think we do kind of need to line by line build this the way we want it to be. It seems like that's tedious, but also necessary.
Yeah.
Is that readable? Okay, I'll make it a little bigger just to be sure. Whoops. Okay, so do you want, we're starting with our existing policy now and editing that, is that right?
Yes. I believe that's what we liked about the preamble, right?
Okay. All right, so I'll go line by line, if that makes sense, and we can all comment. So I know with hate crimes, we said, what do we decide on there? Hate incidents?
Yeah.
Or-
Yeah.
Just gonna highlight our changes. Anything else to change here in this line?
That looks good to me.
Looks good to me.
Okay. All right, should I go on? I don't want to rush anyone. I'll keep the line we're looking at separate here and then pull it into the paragraph when we're done with it.
Do we want to look at the ACAB for this next section just because I'm seeing the not tolerate.
And is that text readable? It's hard to tell on my big screen here. One click there. Okay, and Linda, which part, if you just point me in the right direction here,
I think she meant the first paragraph, right?
right here.
Yeah, so so the next part in our existing policy has that no tolerate, will not tolerate language. So the sample policy goes on to who it involves or else where, like the location, the grounds, and so on. So I don't know what would make sense logically. Probably the alleged harassment must involve conduct that occurred within the school's own program or activity.
This,
Yeah, that sentence.
the long one, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I'm just gonna put this into our doc and we can figure out how it fits.
Wasn't there one more line after that? I can't remember.
This policy is in effect, this one.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's related to the where. I don't know if we keep that, but I think it's related to the
I'll pull it
same
in.
conversation about like defining when it applies.
Yep, so we have the MASC here and then ours below, our current one.
I think I understand ours better. It's more normal language.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a lot of trouble with the term disruptive behaviors because someone could be responding to an act of discrimination or a hate incident that was not disruptive to the masses in a way that could be seen as disruptive. And then that person gets, reprimanded for responding and standing up for themselves. And I've seen that happen time and time again. So I do have trouble with that specific language.
Yeah, I'm not sure the word disruptive belongs in this particular policy. To me, that's a different kind of issue. It almost sounds like it was a euphemism for something else. They were trying not to say something else. That was the best they could come up with.
I agree. It sounds exactly like that.
Yep.
So I actually prefer the MASC language at this point because it gives a lot more clarity on where the end marks are, whereas it can be as loose or as strict as the reader decides. So I would think that something like this, we would want something more concrete than subject to interpretation. So like if the school district, exercised oversight at a location that was funded or sponsored or promoted or endorsed, those are specific actions that you could look back to as, yes, there was a flyer. Yes, there was an advertisement here. Yes, there was approval from the principal's office. And that would be good to have that kind of evidence and chain to keep track of versus, that wasn't really involved. I don't know. That's my reading of the differences. I think in this case, having more tracing of the action that led to an event where harassment could have happened, I think is beneficial.
Ooh, I
I
like
agree.
the part where, let's see, the part I don't like about the MASC statement, because I just don't like the language, is where it says, I agree with most of what you just said, but I think where it says conduct that occurred within the school's own program or activity, I find really awkward. And I appreciate our sentiment that it says at school or school related activities, but then I like the rest of the MASC statement better because it does have more detail. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just think, I don't know. I also think the way that it's worded within a school's own program or activity may be limiting in some way, because what if it's something that's like co-sponsored with the group that like the PTA sponsors, that's technically not the school, but that might be covered in school or school related activities, but may not be covered under the school's own program. I don't know. That's the only little piece that I question, and I'm just one person, so you can
Yeah, well,
ignore me. That's
I sort
fine.
of see your point there. I'm wondering if, for example, if you were at the state track meet, and the kid acted out at the state track meet, I suppose that would be covered because the kids from the Wachusett track team would be there as part of their Wachusett related school activities.
Yeah.
But the program itself is sponsored by the state track organization, whatever it's called. But I do see your point, Malia. But I sort of think that I think that it does make sense to say that it occurred within a school's own program or activity, because I do think we do have to set some limits somewhere. So if the kids aren't participating in a school program or activity, I don't know that we want to take responsibility for whatever they might do if they're at something else, even if that something else is run by another entity.
So I guess my question is, what would be the school-related activities? Like that,
Well, I like the rest of the paragraph that actually does go into more detail and it's clarifying. So maybe it doesn't really matter, but I may just be nitpicky. So you can, as I said, you can disagree with me, and that's fine. But
I don't think it's nitpicky at all, actually, because it comes up a lot, and there's two examples that I'm thinking of. I'm having principal flashbacks here when I was mostly pleasant, but one of them was around PTA, and you mentioned that, Malaya, around like PTA events, and are those considered school events? And it can be kind of in no person's land, meaning like the PTA plans it, and sometimes there's not even an administrator present, and it gets difficult to enforce events that aren't overseen by an administrator. So I think that's one piece. And there's also community events that might be widely promoted in a school with, basically all of grade whatever going, that look and feel a lot like a school-sponsored event.
like I think a few years ago, we had a basketball thing at the high school that was like a charity thing, and everybody in my son's grade went. I think he was in like 4th or 5th grade at the time, and everybody went, and the teachers were on a charity team. And it was a big thing, but it wasn't sponsored by the school at all. It was a completely outside organization, but it was at the high school, and everybody was there. So it wouldn't fit under a school's own program or activity, but it would fit under school-related activity, probably.
But the last sentence in this paragraph says the policy is in effect while students are on school property or property within the jurisdiction. And then it goes on to say school-sponsored activities, which would cover the state, track
meet
we spoke about.
Yeah.
Or if you're on school grounds and the incident is happening, that I think the policy is in effect.
Right.
So then I think that contradicts the first sentence where it says must involve conduct within a school's own program or activity.
I think it adds to it. I think it's intended to add to it a little bit,
Okay.
or Yeah, I think.
Because when I hear must, I think that's like a definite. So that's just me.
Did you guys
I'm-
talk about the not tolerated word? Did you talk about that yet?
Yeah.
A little
Yeah.
bit
Okay.
about not going back to the no tolerance state.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just want to add to that is that, we're looking at a growth mindset and we're looking at learning opportunities for our students. I think something as definitive as no tolerance, zero tolerance, that language doesn't allow for that restorative practice.
Mm-hmm. What about will not permit? Is that better?
Like, I don't like the word not tolerate, because that's
Mhm.
what I had liked about our preamble. But at the same time, if we're starting off positively, I also want to make sure that we're saying that otherwise there's going to be, some seriousness attached to it. So
Mm.
is there another word that we can use other than not tolerate, but still have that sense?
If we use the MASC language, then we don't have to worry about that at all. If we're starting from there. So I guess that's a discussion.
Well, I feel like maybe another way to put it would be to address or investigate and address, because to say we don't tolerate, like, it's already happened, so I don't know what it means to not tolerate. and to say, the other language that's out of my mind now, will not permit, it's already happened, whether we
Mhm.
permit it or not. So I think it
Mhm.
comes down to addressing it, investigating it. I think
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
might bring us somewhere.
So do we just don't need? Do we not need the sentence altogether? Do you think?
Can we say something like the district will take the unlawful disruptive behavior seriously and will investigate, or something like that?
I think we need. So I like the general direction you're going. I think instead of saying unlawful or disruptive behavior, I would say something like the district will investigate incidents of harassment, discrimination, and hate, or alleged incidents. I guess would be a better thing to say. Alleged incidents of harassment, discrimination, and hate. And what was the rest of what you said, Asma?
We put all alleged incidents.
I think I said that will be alleged incidents will be taken seriously and investigated.
Okay, will
And
be
then-
taken seriously and investigated. Yes, that I like that. Will be taken. Yeah, and I think we have to say alleged, unfortunately, because until you investigate, you can't really say for sure that what happened exactly.
Could you
Yeah,
put
for sure.
reported? And then I would think that
Reported.
would take out some of the
Yeah, I like that
loaded.
better. Yep, I like that better. Yep,
Very inclusive.
that's better.
Can
I agree.
can I ask you? I mean, at this point, that's pretty. The differences I'm seeing at this point now are the school or school-related activities versus the school's own program of MASC, and then an expanded definition or explanation, maybe, of what that means. Would it be worth it to take that new beginning of the sentence and plop it at the beginning of the MASC, or are
Oh.
those explanations not useful for us?
Because I think this is what I'm highlighting here is all addressed. You're saying the same thing in this
Yeah.
MASC language, so that
Yeah.
could come out.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
And then moving this to the beginning of this middle paragraph.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right, I'm gonna do that. We can play with it. That's its own sentence, it seems.
Yep. Yeah, and in the next sentence, then, instead of just harassment, I would say the reported or alleged, whichever you prefer, incident of harassment. I would repeat incident of harassment, discrimination, and hate, because I wouldn't just say harassment there, is what I would.
Could you just say the reported incident? Because it's already described in the sentence right in front of it.
Oh, that's a thought.
Reported incident.
I'm just being a grammar person.
Yeah,
sorry.
you're right. I think that's right, Malia.
Then you don't have to be redundant because you've already defined
Yep.
the kind of incident.
Yep, that's right. I like that.
Multiple, maybe? Do it
Sure.
that way?
That's
Yeah, good.
that covers us.
Yep, that works, because there could certainly, unfortunately, be multiple incidents
Mhm.
at the same time. I think that looks good.
I agree.
I'll get rid of this at the bottom here.
Yes.
Okay.
That feels good. Get rid of that.
Yep.
It's bad.
Okay. Moving on.
Just to head back to that first sentence.
Sure.
This has come up now that we've changed the second sentence, but the introductory sentence, could we say in the last line, and a safe learning environment free from instances or incidences of harassment, discrimination, and hate? Right? Because then we sort of repeat that in the second line. So further up, Brendan, where it's highlighted incidents.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Thank you.
Just put the incidents in front of harassment,
Incident of.
incidents of harassment, discrimination, and hate.
Oh.
And I mean, I'm open to comment on that change.
I think that's fine.
My only question is, does that mean it has to be an overt action? I'm just, does that include microaggressions?
I would think so.
Definitely.
Okay.
I think an incident certainly could. That's broad enough.
Yeah,
That's-
I think so.
That's an incident of harassment.
Right.
And it's a good
And
example, too,
discrimination and hate.
of why saying incident is better than crime, right?
Yeah,
Because a
for sure.
microaggression can be, unfortunately, wriggled out of.
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Not always.
I think that the next sentence in our existing policy has the reporting, that all will be reported and so on. I think that's the next.
Okay, and is that the second paragraph of the existing, Linda?
I'm looking at my cheat sheet, so I actually don't
Oh,
know.
okay. All right, well, let me pull it over here. There you go. Zoom in a bit. Yeah, just tell me where that was.
It's the last sentence of the first paragraph.
Okay.
And that I think is something that we legally, I mean, aside from, ethically, we would have to do. I think that's a legal requirement too, isn't it? To promptly investigate all reports and complaints.
It is, and I think this is where we could borrow from the bullying prevention intervention plan language, because it's almost exactly the same. And I think there's a mention of mitigating strategies for the victim that could be mentioned here. So as you're talking, I can pull up the bullying prevention intervention plan so we could do some borrowing.
So that's a question I've had for writing these policies, is if it's okay to be self-referencing and say, we'll promptly investigate using the procedure laid out in the district's bullying prevention and intervention plan. Like, would that be a reasonable expectation to have in a policy? Because the bullying plan has to be updated every 2 years, correct? So it will be recent. It should be.
And, I've looked into that a little bit when we were doing the bullying prevention plan. So I talked to our district lawyer, and he said it's a good practice to follow the same process. If you have a good process for the bullying plan, which we do now, that it should be consistent. There shouldn't really be variation in the process. So I think it's actually how we reference it as a question, maybe, like whether we actually embed it into the policy or
Right.
say C.
That's what
BPIP.
I wanted. That's my question, is do we want to embed it in the policy? Say, look to the specific document, or is that a bad practice for writing policy? And that's where I don't have the experience to know.
Can you say herein? Something described herein?
So I would wonder that question as well. And I don't know what the MAC policy says or how they handle the process question. But one of the, I won't say critiques, but one of the observations I've had of our policies in the past, the time at least I've been on the committee and going to workshops about them and things, is that ours tend to include more process than they should, because policies and process are two different things. And so I would be in favor of less detail and referencing the existing policy with the consistent process that would be updated every couple of years, rather than having to change the specific language every time that's updated also.
So then does that mean that it would be like, where are we? That the reports will be investigated. So, okay, so the district, thank you, Brendan. The district will promptly investigate all reports and complaints of, or, if we change it to incidences, and we'll take prompt effective action. Well, actually, let's just take the first part of it, so just the investigation part of it, and say, it will be investigated as laid out in the bullying prevention and intervention plan, like using a process as laid out. Is that language, good practices for policy, like that exact phrase?
I think if it's not, our legal team will inform us of that when they review it.
Yep.
And so I'd err on the shorter version and let them tell us if it's wrong. Personal opinion.
I agree with that, because I think the danger would be having these splinter investigation approaches that we don't update everything. So I like the centralized idea and just referencing it. And
it's also less updating, because otherwise, if you have the actual steps laid out, then every time you update the bullying plan, and you have to be consistent, you have to go back and reread and re-update every one of these. Now, it might be wise to anyways, if laws change, but we know it's a lengthy process. So
yes. So I just put in what we had currently into our growing policy here.
So I would say at the first pass is where it says hate crimes, with other adjustments for that phrasing to come. Put in as laid out in the bullying prevention and intervention plan, or using a process as laid out in.
Yep.
And then period. And then the next half, I think, is a separate idea that would take a separate discussion.
So would that go right here using?
No.
Okay, I missed that.
Nope. At the end of hate, in the first line.
Using.
Yeah, using.
I'll just try this and see.
Does the bullying plan have a policy number, or is it the plan separate, so it doesn't actually have one?
No number. Yeah, just
Okay,
There-
because
the
No,
title.
plan.
we do have an anti-bullying policy that has its own number, but and I think
That's
it actually
different,
currently has the procedure within it. So
That's
to
fine.
do.
This is fine. I was just clarifying.
I believe it does. I think I remember reviewing it.
Yeah. And so I would say put a period at the end of the
Yep.
BPIP. And then I don't know if further wordsmithing probably is necessary, but that's where I would begin.
There is some. Oh, go ahead.
Such action. Sorry, I'm sorry. Effective. District will take prompt, effective action to end such action, including, I don't know, because behaviors is just so wide open. It worries me when people say that. It can be added onto so many different things. I don't know.
Can we just say
Why don't we
to
put in incidences?
address
The address.
incidents?
Yeah.
Is that, I don't know. I'm thinking
Yeah.
aloud, but
I like that. Address incidents. I think
then it doesn't specify
Right.
behaviors or words or actions, and it doesn't specify a specific action either.
and it's consistent, which I think is good.
And what was that again? The language.
Address
It's-
address action to address incidents.
Okay. Well,
I would say just going back to that first line, promptly investigate all reports and complaints of incidents of something, just to keep our language consistent, right? We're talking about the reported incidents of harassment,
Yep.
discrimination, and hate.
So reported incidents. Right. And it matches with what we had up here. But is that redundant too? It's a question. It's almost the same line in the first.
Could you do, will promptly investigate all such reported incidents using the investigation procedures outlined
Mhm.
In the second one, right?
in the second one. I think that the next section is where the protected classes. So
In our existing one?
yeah,
Yes.
and
Yep,
that
there it
one
is.
for sure is out of date.
Yeah, right here.
Is that well? We can compare it first. Yeah, add that.
Should I put
I'd
it
be
over
Curious.
to our doc here?
Yeah, I'd
Or-
be curious. I know MASC separates that out a lot, so there'll be some differences.
Should we start with MESC and look what they have? Oh, here it is. Right here.
I think that theirs is behind too.
Yeah.
So let's see.
I feel like
Well,
we
we
might
could-
have addressed this in Ed Sub at some point. I feel like one of our policies in Ed Sub.
Yeah, didn't EdSub just
I
do the
think it did.
non-discrimination? Discrimination.
They did
I
in
did.
2019. I looked that up. So there's probably language in there. It was in 2019, which is when the state also issued new language around harassment. I think
Should
what's in MASC is fairly accurate, but it was probably based on that.
I think it leaves out some things that might apply to pregnancy or
Yeah, oh,
milk.
pregnancy is in last year's update. Yes, that
Okay,
is correct. I learned that
so
looking into the sexual discrimination.
with the looking at our current non-discrimination classes, be worthwhile to look at that now if we're also looking at it in harassment.
Yeah, I had that in my document from the last meeting, which I don't have up at the moment, but I had that specific language
Right
in
here.
our policy.
This should be, well, here's ours.
Yep, that was from 2019.
Yeah.
Don't know if the pregnancy was in that one. I think pregnancy was last year that they added it. Or is it
I don't
in
think
there?
it was. I don't remember reading that in there.
No, let me.
Couldn't we put in like health status? Is it there? Health. It does say including but not limited to. I mean,
Yeah, no, there
the
is
more
some.
you list, the more you tend to leave out, right?
There is a specific phrasing though, because MASC updated put out an update about it, and last year, and it was a suggestion to update policies to meet the specific new state language, which did include pregnancy. But I think it was mostly what we have. But I think pregnancy was the addition, and it was specific state language, which obviously I can't find right now. But
So what I had found in state language was pregnancy, military status, and arrest history, arrest record.
oh, I haven't
As
seen that
one.
one.
Yeah, that was what when I just looked up. I think just in the state laws.
I mean, you
of
could add
what,
housing status too.
Yeah.
Well, right. So there's the ones that we're legally obligated to include, right?
Mhm.
And then there's the ones something we would want to make a statement to expand. Right. So where I'm coming from at this particular moment is just about what we legally need to include. And
Right.
those were the three ones that I saw MASC didn't have and we didn't have.
Right.
But I think that this non-discrimination from 2019, I think is includes more than, logically, it would be including more than what's in the harassment.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm just going to pull this part and we can adjust it. I'm just going to take this sentence.
Okay.
And I'm just noticing a confusing wording thing here, related or unrelated to. I get what was happening there, maybe to have it be more inclusive, but I think it's confusing in a policy.
I think the wording like related to but not limited by.
Yeah.
Or something to that effect, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So it leaves it open for other things to also come in.
So I'm just going to pull these protected classes here on account of, all right, I'm just going to put this side by side so we can figure this out. All right. I'm just going to put bold what we have that matches. Religion. we have sex in there, and gender identity seems to be the more current.
So I'm
Yeah,
putting
they're both
in the
included.
I'm putting in the chat the language that was
Thank you.
in February 2019 advisement from MASC, just so you have it.
Yeah, I think
Color.
sex and gender identity are two different things.
Yeah,
They are two different things. I just
We need
copied
both.
the text from my research from the last meeting that I
Right.
yeah, good.
found.
Yeah,
It was February 2019, so just after our discrimination policy was last updated. So that's why it wouldn't be in there. And it says, well, I just copied it. That's easier than reading it all. It seems to be in most of their policies, so I think it's just taken from a state update. I don't know if that's helpful, but
yeah.
it
I'm
says
just trying to see what we're
reference
missing.
to, it says race, color. I think color's kind of weird, but it says race, color, sex, gender identity, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, homeless status, physical and intellectual differences, pregnancy or pregnancy-related condition. But then there's another one that does include military service as well, which is weird that that's not in every one. But that's the most recent.
Trying to see what we're missing here. National origin. So it looks like gender identity and these other 4 are missing. These other 3. We have disability, which, Malaya, the way you have it listed is physical and intellectual differences.
Yeah, I've seen it listed as disability too. That was just from the most recent one that I've seen, but I'm sure disability would probably be fine too.
Linda, you're muted. I saw your mouth moving.
I said, I'm not a legal person. I'm just sharing what I found. But we can do whatever we want.
So, I mean, at the risk of being too wordy, I might even go so far as to say physical and intellectual differences, comma, and disabilities or something like that. So that, I mean, we're in this transitional phase of verbiage. And so acknowledging that we're in this transitional phase, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. By including both terms, it allows us to kind of set a point in time when we could make that transition explicit.
So Laura, it would be after, did you say to add this after disability, physical?
Yeah, or before, something to that effect, that just to ensure that in this time of transition, when we might be in this place of acknowledging both terms and some people not perceiving them to be synonyms of one another, that maybe 5 years down the road, people will acknowledge them as synonyms of each other, but right now they might not. And so to cover that, I say include them both.
We had or in here before. I'm just changing that. And what about these? Should I just put these on the list as well? The other 3?
I know the gender identity and pregnancy are specifically part of the legal language referenced in the MASC policies. I recall that. So I would suggest we include them.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a nice neat paragraph somewhere that I'm not finding right now because I found it for our last meeting and now I'm not finding it. But
I just
I'd have
realized
them-
I was on mute. I think it's important to include the term disability because it is in the law. I don't have a problem with physical differences and intellectual differences, but I don't really see them necessarily as, as parallel, or I forget the word Laura used, but as another word for disabilities necessarily, because people don't commonly use them that way, and also they're not used that way in the law. And also, there could be situations where someone has a physical difference that actually is not considered a disability. I mean, a simple example is using ordinary eyeglasses. The federal law actually explicitly excludes wearing ordinary eyeglasses from the definition of disability. So, yeah, but I don't have a problem with having physical differences and intellectual differences in there. I mean, kids shouldn't get picked on because they wear glasses or because they have red hair or, whatever. So I have no problem with it, but it's not really parallel to disability per se at this point in time. But as you pointed out, Laura, language is ever evolving. And who knows where we'll be in 5 or 10 years. So
So to add into the homeless status part there, I guess like financial situation or something to that. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that sounds far more scientific and legalese than what I was going to say. Thank you.
So both of these probably, right? I mean, I was wondering if we should call it housing status, but I guess why not just, if we put housing status.
Yeah, no,
I like
well,
housing.
housing would be far better
housing.
than homeless. That kind of
Yeah,
has
it's
a
less
stigma to it.
stigmatizing. And there are a lot of people
Mm.
don't realize there are a lot of people in our district that are in various housing situations that people do not think about.
Various
Mhm.
housing situations, exactly.
And that's one of my roles as the McKinney-Vento coordinator too. And I've been doing that for years. And it's really important how we approach that conversation with families too, because the word homeless is loaded, and
It
it
Yes.
has a stigma associated with it. So
Mhm.
yeah, housing instability is more kind of how we're
And there's a
talking
lot
about
of
now.
different situations that people may not, I won't even go in detail, but people may not think about. I know of a couple that, people living with extended family because they don't
Yeah.
want to leave the district, especially right now. And, it's
Doubled up.
you would
Yeah.
not notice that, offhand.
Yeah, doubled up is one of the McKinney-Vento homeless, and they do use that language, but homeless categories. So I'll just put these in. Any preference on where? I guess it's not a rank ordered list, so it can go anywhere.
I mean, personally, I think the ones that are legally obligated, personally, it made sense to put those first because they are legally obligated, and then just as a means of ordering, and then put the other ones toward the end, but that's just my opinion. Or we could do it alphabetically, or, I don't know. I don't know what makes sense.
Just threw them there just to see, but
I'm sure that when the lawyers see this, they'll have some nice, neat paragraph that fits state law. And then we have a couple extras we added to it. That's what I suspect.
Can we change on that second line, the first part of that second line, to be including related to but not limited by, or something to that effect? Somebody help me with that. But I think the unrelated is, as you said, Brendan, is confusing.
yeah.
Related but not limited by. I think that was what you had said,
yeah.
Laura. That works.
Related to, related but not limited to.
Mm-hmm.
But not limited to.
Yeah, I think that reads a little bit better, doesn't it?
So how about that first sentence with prohibits and then our consistency with incidents, using the term incidents for harassment, discrimination, and hate.
Mm-hmm.
Is prohibit the correct verb? I guess is what I'm wondering.
I wonder if we look to, yeah, they do use prohibit here in MASC. So I think it's it seems appropriate to.
I think
Yeah.
that's an absolute, like, we can prohibit all we want, right? And I think that makes it an absolute thing. Whereas it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to happen, right? Like the whole
Yeah.
tolerated thing
Mhm.
is sort of out of our control. But the prohibited, we make a statement of prohibition about these things.
Is it, I'm going to ask a silly technical question, grammatical question. The MASC policy uses a different tense. It says harassment prohibited by the district includes, but is not limited to, and then the whole list. And we have the
Oh,
district prohibits. So it's just a different tense, which
I
not a
think
huge
it's
deal,
actually,
but which is
I-
correct.
sorry, Emily, if I'm talking over you, I didn't mean to do that. I think it's actually a noun, isn't it? Without looking at the other one, right? The harassment prohibited by the district, it includes, right? So it's the prohibited harassment
Okay.
that is now getting defined. It's not,
Right.
but in ours, it is a verb.
In ours, it's a verb. So which do we wish it to be? I guess.
I mean, I think it could be either. It doesn't seem to really get in the way of anything the way we have it, you know.
Just a consistency thing.
I'm just going to grab a line here that we probably want to look at it if we have time. We still have a little more to do in this one. Just highlight this. Sorry about all the colors here. They gave me a hard time about my color coding in the office. So.
I think it's helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm visual though.
Yeah, me too.
I agree.
Okay, so are we going with prohibits? I think it's
I think
consistent
it's
with.
good.
I think that my actual is just in terms of flow of repeating the full district name after it's been the district.
Oh, yeah.
The district.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Just
go
like-
with the district. Makes sense.
Is that a band name?
The district. It is now. Who wants to join?
Yeah.
All right. Does this seem good? I think we have an inclusive list there, at least for the moment, until it changes. Just at the end, pregnancy-related conditions. Probably add an S.
Yeah, that's included in some documents and not others. So yeah.
Yeah, but plural.
Yeah.
Plural.
Plural.
Yeah.
It's probably more
That next
applicable
section
to.
has that behavior
sorry.
thing again. Sorry, no, we both talked at the same exact time.
Go ahead.
I don't know. I think I said it. It just has the behavior thing, and that's very wishy-washy. So
Is it like credible reports or something like that, right? It's about the investigations into the reports that are found that have harassment has been confirmed. Then that means that the student is in violation of this policy, and so these things will happen, right? So we could say confirmed reports, something along those lines.
That would work.
Could we just say, okay, could we just take out the behavior and say students who are found to be in violation of this policy?
I think we could.
That works for me.
Students who are found, right?
Because that covers all kinds of actions.
It's funny how it doesn't say behavior with the employee thing. It's just kind of interesting. I've seen that a lot because adults don't act up, but kids.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't mean that, but I'm just saying it's funny
Right.
how it's not even in their policy. We don't talk about adult behavior.
No.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And behaviors are subjective. I mean, that's just a whole
Yep.
other discussion.
It is.
So can
What
we
did they
change
say?
the will be to maybe in each
Yes.
of those statements?
Will be to May.
Yeah, may be subject
Yeah.
to disciplinary action, may be subject to disciplinary action.
Can I push back on that? Just
Yep.
because this is for people who are definitively found to be in violation. So
True.
wouldn't there be disciplinary action of some kind? Or,
Yeah.
I mean, I would think that a confirmed report would lead to some kind of action and not just, oh, it happened. Yes, it's been confirmed.
Do
What
we
do you
have
want
model
now?
language in our bullying policy that
Yeah.
would address that? That we could model or copy?
Yeah, let me pull that over. Hold on.
Because I know it addresses violations and what happens. Or
I'll zoom in.
tries to.
Again, I'm just trying to think about our commitment to restorative justice and
Mhm.
mitigation. And
Mhm.
so I totally agree that there should be some sort of consequence. I struggle with that word if we're trying to also make it a learning opportunity.
Yeah, I sort of like May for that very reason. Because it depends on what it was, how serious it was, what the intent was, you know. So I'm tempted to leave it at May, but I'm interested in what the MASC says.
I might change instead of saying something may happen, instead addressing the word like disciplinary action more
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah. I support that. Yeah.
I think also something to remember is that harassment is the legal term, right? That is,
Mhm.
it's different than other bullying. So I think that we might want to look at disciplinary versus may or will.
Yeah.
The bullying plan talks about may result in intervention. I just saw. I didn't read the whole thing,
Hmm.
but it was
It's a
talking
lot
about.
more. It's pretty wordy. Yeah.
Well, we don't have to copy all that. I was just looking at it for an example of something that might help us through
Yeah.
this process.
We're also going to be following, the bullying prevention process for investigation. So that does pull in all of this. But so we're looking here at. Oh, and it is 8:30. I know we try to stick to 90 minutes, but
Mhm.
we can try to do this now.
Mm.
So we're looking
We
at
should probably try
disciplinary.
to finish this section before we.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
So could we do, students who are found to be in violation of this policy will be subject to intervention.
I
up
like the
to-
intervention.
Mhm.
And then I think we have to show I think legally, don't we have to show the extent that it's including suspension or even expulsion?
Mm-hmm.
And then the pursuant to disciplinary codes, I don't know if something else makes sense for our district. But the same thing would be for the employees found to be in violation will be subject to intervention again. I don't know. But they have to know the outer limits of what could happen if harassment is
Yeah.
definitively shown.
I'm wondering. I'm wondering if. How about subject to intervention, which may include, and maybe I'm getting back being too wishy-washy again, but will be subject to intervention, which may include disciplinary action? I mean, I think especially with employees, actually, that's even more important because I think it needs to be clear. I'm fairly, I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that the word disciplinary action is used in their contract somewhere. So we probably want to make sure that that our language is consistent somehow with that, or at least includes that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so the last phrase of the employees line is subject to contractual disciplinary obligation.
There we go. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So-
Yes.
Makes sense.
Although it says subject to, up to, and including termination of employment. subject to contractual disciplinary obligations. That almost seems like a caveat on termination of employment. So I'm not quite sure that that actually, let's see, subject to
Okay.
intervention up to, yeah, I'm not sure. That's awkward phrasing, I think.
Really, it is.
Yeah, I think that's awkward.
Okay. So I know you can forget the intervention if you want. I know that came from the bullying policy, and I like that, but I didn't read every word of it.
I like it. I just think we
Um,
should add to it a little bit. I think we should say subject to
Does-
intervention, which may include.
Does the MASC policy have more detail? Because I know they had a lot of subsections about employees and students. And I wonder if there's language there. There's definitions.
Well, this actually came. Did we pull this from there? I can't remember now.
Yeah,
We did
yeah,
this part, but underneath that, there's all
I
those
got it, yeah.
subsections. Do those address actions, or are those just defining what constitutes? I wonder when you get to the action part if it addresses some language.
it's more-
The next section is the definition of like relationships within harassment, but not about outcomes, I think. It's more about defining what harassment could look like.
Oh, this talks about in their model policy in MASC, it talked about discussing opportunities for training, and that's what was under their action section. So that may get complicated.
Yeah, it doesn't really get to that.
It has, it talks, let's see, it might be a little above where you are. It says right around there, it says, let's go down a little bit more. It defines, and then it says the district will investigate allegations, and it has different subcategories. And then the last sentence talks about opportunities to the designated recipients for appropriate training, which I don't know if that covers it either, but that seems to be what they say about harassment. So I don't know if that's what we need to do. I was just looking for their example as a point of reference. So never mind. Not helpful.
So at this point, what is the issue of what? Sorry, I must have lost the plot here.
We're trying to figure out the disciplinary action part and how to cover that and still be not harsh, I guess is my interpretation.
What about my suggestion that will be subject to intervention, which may include disciplinary action? To me, the word intervention suggests lesser ways of dealing with the issue. But if we say which may include disciplinary action, then we still make it clear that it could be pretty serious.
I like that. Intervention and also may include.
Which may include, yeah.
Yep.
We'll always do something.
Something
and
will happen.
Something will happen. Exactly. That's what I meant. Yes.
Great.
I like that change. Yeah.
We're going with will, right?
It'll be subject to intervention,
Yeah.
which may include.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will, not may. Yeah.
The other way demanded that it had a disciplinary action.
Yes. We want to include, not to again add another word just for the sake of doing it, but is it fitting to put the word mitigate in there? Intervention to mitigate. Is that appropriate there?
Would that be included in intervention?
Yeah, I think
I
it,
mean,
it could
possibly.
be. Yeah. I think
Okay.
intervention could include mitigation actions.
But doesn't need to be explicitly said here.
That was my thinking, again, with the not being too specific, because then you paint yourself in a specific direction. I also think if the public sees mitigate, if they actually read this, they might go a little crazy, because that has a very specific connotation to some people in this type of work. And
So
I don't know.
can I ask Brendan? Can I ask you a question with your experience? For example, with adding the word intervention, it's lightening this disciplinary action. Do you think that would, because we're saying if you are found to be in violation of this policy, is this a loophole that then says, okay, you're in violation, but we're not going to take many steps? Because
No,
an
I think
intervention can just mean I have a meeting with you. I told you we could have done X, Y, and Z, but we didn't.
right. Well, I think it's kind of like we were talking about with one of the previous conversations, but I like that it's more inclusive because disciplinary definitely can happen, but it shouldn't just be disciplinary, and that's the spirit of the bullying plan too. It should be, it should improve the skills of whoever we're talking about, whether an employee or a student, that they won't repeat the action. And part of that is skill, part of that is discipline. So I actually like how it's a little broader, and it doesn't shy away from discipline. It's mentioned in both.
I'm just making sure there's no loophole, like, because when someone is found to be in violation, if my child or I was the victim, I would expect some sort of action, not just a intervention. I would expect that there is something that I can see as a consequence of, the school is taking action in some way. So I'm just trying to make sure there's no loophole, and I understand what you're saying. It's inclusive, but I'm just a little afraid of the loophole.
Would you see an educational
intervention
component
in
as
action?
not being an
Why?
action though? Because I think that's
I've
also
seen
an
too
action.
many. I've seen too many people who have complained about a certain incident, and at most what has happened is somebody spoke to someone, in their privacy, and it was told to the other person that a teacher spoke to them, and that was the end of that. There was no, there's no proof of what intervention was taking place, what actual conversation happened.
I
what
don't think
kind
we're
of-
allowed to do that anyways under our bullying plan though. That's one of the frustrations I have with it. But, I don't know.
which I mean, I think either we're kind of giving them the right to do that with that kind of language in this sentence.
I guess I think of it as a spectrum because there's a wide range of actions that might fall under this, and there may be very serious things which we've heard a lot about, and there may be this happened actually with someone I know recently. It's not an excuse, but like the 7-year-old repeating a word they heard in a rap lyric in a different context and really have no idea that it might be offensive to someone. And there's a spectrum of learning, I guess.
I agree with you. There's a spectrum, but there's obviously cases where the loophole has been abused.
So I guess
I
this is the
absolutely
fact
see what
that
you're
we have a
saying.
policy, and then we have the implementation of that policy, which that goes into the procedure and the plan. And I think that we need to have some assurances that the policy will be enforced. Even though we currently have a policy, it sounds to me, based on some testimonial we've heard, that the policy was not being enforced. And for whatever reason, part of that is probably training and avoidance measures and so forth. But we need to make sure that our policy then leads to, professional development on crucial conversations and difficult conversations and intervention strategies, and teachers and staff feeling empowered to, if you see something, say something. If students see something, they need to say something. And that's where our practice needs to come into place.
And that the intervention fits the crime per se. Like, let's not use that word, but that it actually fits, not that they did something awful and then the intervention was, oh, hey, maybe you don't do that anymore. So it has to fit. So there needs to be checks and balances. I don't know if that's something that we can write into anything, that there's checks and balances of those things. But I agree with what you're saying, Asima, that it's up to the definition and belief of whoever is, doling out the intervention.
Is the phrase proportional useful? Subject to proportional intervention, something like that. I don't know if that's useful. or more wiggle.
I think
But-
that is inviting
Because-
wiggle personally, just
well,
my opinion.
So where I'm coming from is that I know later on in the policy with defining harassment that it's so much dependent upon the person who has experienced it, that if there's a way to incorporate that part of the definition of harassment into a proportional response, that might be a way to check that it's not interpreted too loosely. I don't know. Just an idea.
What I'm thinking is almost like you would need tiered offenses. Everything would have to be on a tier. Oh, a rap lyric, first tier, second tier. That's where we're going right now. So.
Yeah, and that's a slippery slope.
Exactly.
Just
yeah.
Work in districts where we've completely revamped code of conduct, and it takes years
Mhm.
because there's so many unintended consequences that happen where something could be. I think Krista was getting at this too. Like behaviors could be amplified, exaggerated, over disciplined. So I think going back to this, what I like about the way students and employees are separated, it triggers. It references back to disciplinary codes, which are, basically our
Handbooks and
codes.
things.
Yeah, handbooks, exactly. Thank you. And then, so that's for students, and contractual disciplinary obligations for employees. So it goes back to places where those live and exist. So I think that, and from my vantage point, that's what this policy should do, is point to those, just like it's pointing to bullying prevention intervention plan. So it won't be one-stop shopping, if I think of it that way.
So are we better off living with will be subject to disciplinary action? Because this is harassment, this is discrimination, this is hate incidences, right?
Mhm.
Confirmed. Do we want to live in a district that doesn't see disciplinary action along with, right? Because it's not exclusive. It's not like we couldn't do restorative practices along with disciplinary action, correct? Or am I off base there?
Oh,
I
it
think
most
you
certainly should be combined. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, and if the point of these two sentences is to just say, hey, if you harass someone, discriminate against someone, or do some kind of hate action, and it's confirmed, then you will face disciplinary action of some sort. You may also face other things that will help build the skills, but you are definitely going to face disciplinary action of some kind. Isn't that the goal of this section? Isn't that what should happen?
That's what I was thinking, because if you are already found to be in violation of this policy, then
And when I read it the way it is, I totally understand what you're saying, but when I read it, I think it includes both of those things the way it's written now.
Right. Yeah,
So I
that's
guess that's the discrepancy that we're
Mhm.
stuck at, because I think the way it reads now reflects or allows for both of those options. But
Mhm.
I appreciate where you're coming from, but I also, I don't know,
I like giving us the most sort of the flexibility, I guess. Um, from my perspective, the more flexibility, the better in terms of the school's response, because we can't possibly anticipate the wide array of things that could possibly happen, and you want for lack of a better term, the intervention or the punishment to fit the crime, whatever that might be, and also especially with students, the age of the kids, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, I like this language personally because it gives us the widest latitude.
and we may also have our own biases, because obviously we're all already tuned into these issues, so we assume there'll be some consequences, and other
exactly.
people
We're
may
assuming that
not.
the person who's going to be doing the action or intervention is going to do it proportionally, but the people in charge sometimes have their own biases and will choose the lighter version because of their own biases.
And I guess
And I think that's what the policy is also to protect, right? It's not just to protect the students and employees, it's also to instruct the person who is supposed to be part of the solution.
And I guess that's when I go back to in the bullying plan where like the policy versus implementation, because the bullying plan has very specific steps, and Brendan's talked about at least plans to train people around that and around even some of these other diversity issues and make them more aware of these things in the long-term plan. And I think that all works together. But I guess it's a question of if we have to be that specific in every policy or not. Or
I just want to
the
remind the group that we've heard so many students earlier this year talk about racism and remarks and whatnot happening. And even though they were reported, you know, intervention or something looked like it was done, but it wasn't taken appropriately. And that is what I'm trying to avoid, is for that to be done again, so that we're instructing our instructors and administrators that this is what we are expecting, that we're not expecting it to be taken lightly. Because we've heard so many students say similar kind of issues that they have experienced.
And I don't know if
That's
this
true.
language would specifically make that clear any more than it is now. Basically, because I think that's more of an action and training piece.
If you put disciplinary action first, which includes intervention and repairs, that might, or whatever the wording is, then we definitely have an action that is a discipline in there, and that could include interventions and what was the other one, Linda, you said? And
I'm not sure.
Repairs. There's some sort of repairing of
restorative
Justice, yeah.
So can I sorry,
that
Laura
might
has
make
her
it
hand up. I don't know if
feel-
anyone can see that, but
I'm sorry, that might make it feel more certain that something was going to be done for people. Does that feel better?
I don't know. I mean, I guess one problem that's come up in the story students have told us is that nothing gets done. There is no intervention whatsoever. It's just kind of ignored. And to me, having intervention here will be subject to intervention means that somebody's got to do something. But it leaves flexibility as to what that should be.
can we separate them? Can we separate it so that there's the statements about disciplinary action, because we want to make sure something is done, and the disciplinary action has a document to go back to for all the options for those disciplinary actions. And then in a separate sentence say, the district may also take steps towards skill building, or however we want to phrase it. But so it's separated so that, yes, we are taking it seriously. Something has to be done. But we, you know, in another breath, the other something that must be done is working towards making sure this doesn't happen again. But I just totally stepped on Laura's hand, and I apologize.
You deserve to go first on that one, because I saw you trying to speak for a long time. So I like that. I also, at the risk of sounding insensitive, you know, I would hate for our corrective measures on past lack of responses to be an over response, to be hyper vigilant, to have that zero tolerance policy.
Right.
Forget that we are a learning institution. And so I you know, while I appreciate that the district has may have underperformed in responding to these instances in the past, I would hate to pigeonhole our administrators and future students into a policy that is overly corrective and overly harsh.
Laura, you're getting at a measured response, right? Rather than not an overreaction or an underreaction.
Right.
Right. I don't
Exactly.
want a no response, and I don't want a zero tolerance,
Mhm.
hypervigilant response. But yes, a measured response. We need to find
Hmm.
that place in the middle where we are, helping people become their best selves.
Hmm.
I was hoping one of our students might be here because they seem to have a lot of insight on this.
They do.
I was
Yes.
wishing they were here tonight to just chime in on this piece. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I think
Well,
there's going to be
could
many
we-
sessions doing this, so
No, I
there'll be
know.
other.
I
Yeah.
was looking. I'm like, oh darn, they're not.
I know.
Could
I don't know.
could we look at what these, disciplinary codes would be? Because I mean, I feel like we're just kind of talking from a place of not knowing. I mean, what if
Mhm.
we go back on our own time and look at what the disciplinary codes are in the handbooks? We might be fine with the list that's
Yeah.
there and say, yep, that works. If the steps are there. And so, and then we don't have to talk in circles about what is, what's measured, who is going to be the one measuring it, and who's going to be doling it out, or you know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
let's go back and see what is in existence.
I think that's
Yeah.
a really good idea. And I had also, I just dropped my thought. What would I want to say? It just left my head. I'm sorry. I'll see if it comes back to me.
Okay.
Oh, is it worth it to have? And I think this is like brainstorming that I should really hold off on, except just to say, because I can't help myself. If there's a provision for like training within a policy like this, of administrators will be trained in anti implicit bias or something like that. You know what I mean? Like that kind of language that would help out the examples that we heard about from this past summer where things were reported and the response was deemed insufficient by the person who was wrong.
Hmm.
So I think that's a good point, and it brought me back to my thinking was that in our policy we should have wording about the reporting of these instances. Like we need to have a report, an annual report, and I think we did this before in a policy, right? We should be having as a committee, we should be getting an annual report on the number of reports, the number of findings, the number of investigations, the number of findings, and what the consequences of the interventions and the supports were put in place, so that we can track that data, ensure that our professional development and training is effective, and that the policy is being implemented appropriately.
And just previewing what we might get to next time, there's a record keeping requirement that gets at that a little bit in the MASC policy. They actually do mention restorative justice, just as a side note, which is nice to see.
Oh, good.
So it does get to that a little bit later, and that we might have to just be more specific. So does this feel like a good spot to pause?
Hmm.
I would say
I
so.
believe so.
Great conversation, everybody.
Yeah, it always is.
If that's the case, I'm ready to take a motion. Oh, wait, before we do, we got to choose our date for our next meeting.
Oh,
And-
yes.
I just want to mention something on that too, because I think Daryl wanted to join us for the next one. So I'm wondering if it's possible to put a couple potentials, like to do two options maybe, because I don't have his calendar. If
Sure.
that's possible.
We had talked before about alternating Tuesdays and Thursdays to try to get
You're right.
more schedules to work.
Hmm.
So next would be a Thursday if we're using that guide. Maybe should we maybe offer a Tuesday versus a Thursday as those potential dates, or would it be better to separate weeks?
I mean, like, so maybe a Tuesday and a Thursday option.
Yeah,
Right,
like,
So-
and then we can pick
Yeah.
up the rotation right after, whichever
Yeah.
one is chosen.
so like the 9th versus the 11th or something? Is that
Right,
would be our
right.
2-week schedule?
I'm wondering about, see, it's
Well,
getting
the
so dense
11th
now
is the
with our,
management subcommittee meeting, so.
Yeah, and I can't do the
Ninth.
11th, but
I was thinking more
Yeah.
realistically, like the week of the 22nd. I know it's a month, but budget season is upon us.
Well,
yeah, right.
I think the 15th we have to have our budget approved. So,
So the 23rd or the 25th is the next available, you're saying?
I was
well,
thinking
my
that,
question would be, if we're going to be done with the budget supposedly by the 15th, would the 18th be too soon, or I don't know. I'm just, or we could give him a couple different weeks.
Like if we did Thursday the 18th versus Tuesday the 23rd, is that
Yeah.
what you mean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I mean, I don't know.
That works.
That's good.
yeah,
Can
I'm
I
available.
ask about future agendas? Do you think we could maybe incorporate other items into our work? Maybe not. I know this is such a dense policy, so it's taking a long time, but I wondered if a school calendar in light of holidays, school calendar is going to come before the full committee I think pretty soon. What about like new courses that might be brought up that might come to the full committee? We might want to consider.
There's two this
for-
year that we didn't get asked to approve, which is an interesting discussion.
But with other courses as they come up or something like that. I didn't know if we might be able to work that into our schedule versus just 90 to 120 minutes of pure policy.
Mm-hmm.
Which you love, Linda. I could.
I do. I actually,
No, things in small doses.
Linda is
Yeah,
actually
some
someone
variety.
who seems like can read all this stuff very happily.
Oh, that
No,
makes
but-
sense though, and I don't
Yeah.
know the question
this is
about
a
the
vote for the
calendar.
humanities, guys.
That's a good question.
So did we decide 18th to the 23rd as options?
Yeah.
Okay. And then whatever we choose, we'll just do the next rotation so that whoever can't make it on a Tuesday or a Thursday, they'll be able to make it for the next Tuesday, Thursday that we won't be meeting.
And Brenda,
I don't know
do
if I
we
explained
know,
that right.
does Daryl have anything specific he is hoping to discuss with us?
Oh yeah. Just
Or
to
is he
preview that-
just listening to us and you about policy?
he wants to see you all. No. So it's about kind of the longer term planning for this work related to bringing like an outside partner in, like Deep
Okay.
we talked about. So we want to get some feedback from you all on that. So that would probably be an
That's
additional.
great.
Yeah.
That would be excellent.
I'm excited to hear that because a lot
Yeah.
of people have been asking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To look at, probably the proposal we have from and to discuss that. So you'll have that in advance of the meeting
Yeah.
to review.
Then I would certainly suggest meeting, sooner rather than later with that is great because that may
Yeah.
take some time
I think
to implement
we could
whatever.
review the goals that we had outlined and agreed upon. I think there were 5 goals of this subcommittee. And maybe if he comes, we can talk about it in depth with him about those goals. And that if they are going to bring someone on, how that someone can actually address some of those goals
Yeah.
or help address them.
Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Well, hopefully one of those 2 dates will work because as I said, that's after the budget is supposedly voted on. And so hopefully that'll be a little less stressful.
Yep.
I mean, assuming that we get through that all in time.
Well, we
Cross
have
our
the
fingers.
15th as an overflow, right? So.
Yeah, I have no idea. I haven't thought that far ahead. Had we not had other events, I expected we would have had a budget meeting this week, but other events kind of took over, so I have no clue, but should be interesting.
Sounds good. If that's the case,
Anyways.
I can take a motion.
So move to adjourn.
Second?
Let's go down the
Send it
list.
to us.
Member Longbalio,
Aye.
Member Woodland,
Yeah.
Member Gustafson,
Yes.
Member Bennett. You're on mute.
I said yes. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I
Member Ayala,
Yes.
Member Krishnamam,
Kirschenbaum, yes.
And I vote yes too. So thank you so much for staying a little bit later than